Liz, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know. This is the first time that we've had somebody on the show that we work with. So for people listening, in my day job, Liz and I work on the same team. And I just wanted to say before we get started that Liz is a star. Um, Not only in what you see from her external work, but she's awesome to work with. And she really does practice everything that she preaches in her books and in her illustrations. And if you aren't familiar with Liz, she's not only the head of content at Humu, but she's the co-author of No Hard Feelings, which if you haven't read, you should definitely check out. And she has another book that's coming out pretty soon that she's also co-authoring called Big Feelings. So, Liz, thank you so much for joining, and we're excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. You are also very fun, very great to work with. So there won't be any deep, dark secrets coming out about either of us at work today.
I have to add that my girlfriend, my partner, she's in the HR people space, and she is in talent management for a 10,000 employee company. And we've had a lot of what I felt like were impressive guests, and I shared them with her, and she was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And when I told her that you were joining, Liz, she was like, "Oh my God, really?" So there you go.
That's really cool to hear. I will say the bar is being set extremely high for this conversation. So I will try to live up to that.
Awesome. So, we like to start every episode with a good news story. So, it could be personal, could be work related. Um, but yeah, we like to start the show off on a positive note. And I guess to make it easier, I can get us kicked off. So I'm going to Vegas this weekend, and I'm going with two of my brothers. Um, so first of all, like none of us have ever done a trip together, like where it's just us three, and none of us have been to Vegas. So excited to spend some quality time with them, and excited to go to Vegas for the first time.
I'll go next, only because mine is somewhat piggybacking off of Daniel's. So I have labeled 2022 as the year of the wedding bonanza year, because I have like 6 weddings that I need to go to, and it's off to a great start. We went to our first wedding in LA. It was a lot of fun. No one got COVID, no one got sick. So that is a success. And my bonus good news is that I've got my travel booked for Daniel's wedding next month. So that's also exciting.
Barely
Yeah.
beat the deadline.
In typical Stephen Huerta fashion. Yep.
We are at whom I'm very excited for Daniel's wedding too. I was like, we need photos immediately. Put them on the cloud right away. My good news is kind of similar to Daniel's. I, especially when the pandemic first hit, have always been pretty bad at taking vacation. And so I would say when we first switched to remote work, I was that person who kept pushing it off and being like, I'll take vacation when COVID is over and we can actually do something fun with the time. And so I randomly picked this Friday and next Monday to take off. There's no reason. I was just like, I need to get in the habit of taking vacation. And so I am excited to just have a random 4 days off for no reason other than I thought I could use a break.
And I love how you used a LinkedIn poll to decide which days you're going to take off.
Yeah. Classic like 2020 millennial. Gotta see what LinkedIn says.
That's great. That's great. So I think that most of our audience will be at least somewhat familiar with you and your story, but I guess just give us, the highlights from your career and how that all led to you writing No Hard Feelings and then now Big Feelings.
Yeah. So I think relevant backstory to go way, way back is my parents are both immigrants, academics, very quantitative, very much have that mentality of like study something that they understand, get a job, and stay at that job for 40 years. And that's success. And so I couldn't do pre med. So that was the failure was like become doctor number one, banker number 2, lawyer number 3. So then I went sort of more the banker route, and after college got a job as an economic consultant. I was doing a lot of stats analysis, securities lending litigation, really fun stuff. And basically found, I would say 3 months into that job, that I really hated it. I would be at the office until 6 p.m. You'd just be waiting for an email from a lawyer. Then you would get that at 6, and then your work would start. So I was often there till 1 or 2 in the morning, staring at a Bloomberg terminal. It also wasn't creative. It wasn't personally meaningful. And I still really tried to stick it out for a long time. And then it got to the point where I was having migraines. Like I just physically had all these manifestations of this isn't working and I have to quit. So I quit and had nothing else lined up, freaked out completely, and actually then ended up working as a barista at Starbucks for about 7 months, which we can go into. But that for me was this really transformative experience of understanding the power of branding. Starbucks had been so thoughtful about onboarding, about manager training, about how customers should interact with employees. And at the core of all of that was emotion. So at the same time that I was having this entry into, wow, like emotions really affect how you feel at work, obviously, but it wasn't obvious to me at all. They also can create this like really compelling brand experience for people. People love Starbucks coffee. Like there's just a huge following there and a loyalty. And then that kind of caused me to look back at my consulting job and think, okay, it was a lot of emotion. I just clearly right away didn't like it. Was there anything I could have done differently? What can I learn from what my feelings were telling me about where I should go next? And then that kind of all later culminated in no hard feelings, big feelings. It was really this, well, for lack of a better phrase, like emotional awakening of I was very stoic, suppressed everything, and then sort of being forced to confront that you can't just ignore your emotions. Like eventually they will run you into the ground if you are pretending like everything's fine when it's not.
Yeah. You would get along really well with one of the guests that we had a few months back. So her name's Jess Gallica, and her whole project that she's working on is about women making career pivots. And her story is so similar to yours. She worked in
Whoa, cool.
consulting. Stephen, where did she work in consulting? I can't remember where, but
At
she,
McKinsey, I think she was at McKinsey or BCG, one of the big
yeah,
consulting
and
top tier
same
firms.
thing. She started getting these terrible migraines and realized like I can't do this anymore, and quit her job, changed her career. So just wanted to point that out. But
That's so
That's
cool. Yeah, I'll have to look into her work and what she's doing.
really important follow up to the Starbucks story. What's your go-to order at Starbucks, and is it off menu?
uh, That's my answer is so boring. So I'm going to do drink and food. So drink, when I first started working at Starbucks, a week later, one of my coworkers who'd been there for a longer time, he actually gave himself an ulcer from drinking so much coffee. So I had that in the back of my mind. So I really made myself a strict rule of I can only ever drink black coffee. Because once I go down the like mocha chocolate frappe with like peanut butter sprinkles, like it is game over for me, because I had unlimited access to anything I wanted. So I to this day only drink black coffee. So very boring answer. It's like a grande French roast. I think their food is massively underrated. I've definitely been brainwashed, but I love their breakfast sandwiches. I think their birthday cake pop is phenomenal. I still go to Starbucks for the food, which people make fun of me for, but I think it's tasty. Also around the holidays, like the pumpkin cheesecake muffin, great.
So I'm actually like you. I go to Starbucks and I get the most boring order, drip coffee. So
Yep.
I feel you on that order. Steven, you got to
I was
watch
going to
out
say,
and stop drinking so much coffee. You're going to get an
can
ulcer.
can we spend some time on this topic alone? So my go-to, I'm all about caffeine intake. Like that is like the primary objective with coffee and Starbucks. And so I'm a grande red eye. So
Wow.
not
Bold.
far off of you guys, just kind of a little extra with the extra shot of espresso. And then food wise, I love the protein boxes because when you're in a bind and you don't really want a meal, but you don't want to be hangry either. So like the little boxes that have like the little piece of naan bread or whatever that is, and the boiled egg, etc. But my favorite meal at Starbucks is only in Europe. They have like this panini like egg sandwich thing, and you can't get it here in the US. You can only get it, I've only found it in the UK, but that's
That
my
sounds
all-time
great.
favorite at Starbucks.
I think it's also important to clarify that this episode is not sponsored by Starbucks, but it should be.
It
It
should
absolutely
be.
should be.
It should.
Oh God, I love it. Okay, Liz. So we ask this question to every guest, and I think with you it'll be a little bit different because we're not going to be focusing on Humu, but more so on your work outside of Humu. But I wanted to leave this question in there. What is it like to be a Humu employee, and why should Steven be jealous that we get to work there?
Uh, well, first of all, we get every other Friday off this year. So I think game over, basically. But I think that represents a broader trend of every company now is saying we care about culture, we care about our people are great, we want people to have work-life balance. And I think Humu puts truly its money where its mouth is in a way that many organizations don't. So giving us every other Friday off, paid time off. There's a policy that I love called Celebrate, excuse me, Celebrate You Days, where there's a lot of days that are meaningful to us personally, culturally, that are not nationally recognized holidays. And so the idea is you shouldn't have to take PTO to take that time off. You can just put it on the calendar. You can share with people why you want to take it off. You don't have to. So I love that. It's really like whatever's authentic to you. If you want to talk about it, great. If not, totally fine. And then there's also a small budget that you can get. So let's say it's like Lunar New Year, or if you want to take off a day to commemorate the Stonewall riots, you can also have a lunch and have people expense a treat or expense a book or something to help them learn about why this day is important in history and in your life. And so all these, I think there's many examples that I could go on about, but I think it's rare to see companies put real budget behind cultural initiatives.
And I'm jealous. I'm a big fan of the work you guys do. I don't need to be made any more jealous. But the one thing I will share is I have seen a distinct change in Daniel. And, obviously we record this podcast together, but we're cousins, we're friends. And there's just been a calm in him since he started working at Humu that just wasn't there before. And so I think that says it all when you can be your true self and come to work, and you can avoid the emotional swings that come with a day job. Like I feel like that's when the company's getting culture right, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, I love to hear that, and that you pointed it out. I think this also goes to just emotions at work in general, where you don't ever have a horrible day at work and then have a wonderful time at home with your family. Like you have a horrible day at work and then you have a horrible night and you probably have a terrible weekend. And so I think, yeah, we just tend to underestimate the true impact on our lives that a bad job has.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to dig into it. We're going to talk more about this. And so, of course, I checked out Big Feelings on Amazon and I pre-ordered a copy for my partner. She's out for a walk right now, so it's going to be a surprise gift that I give her. But the summary on Amazon says, we don't often know how to talk about what we're going through, much less handle it. Over the last couple of years, we've dealt with productivity guilt, pandemic anxiety, and Zoom fatigue. Big Feelings addresses anyone intimidated by the oversized feelings they can't predict or control, offering tools to understand what's really going on, find comfort, and face the future with a sense of newfound agency. So why do you think we're all so scared of confronting these emotions at work?
Yeah, one thing I do want to flag before we dive in is that is the publisher version summary of the book. We also, I think over the past 2 years, it is important to acknowledge we felt a lot more than that, right? We've confronted like structural inequity, like racism, hate crimes, just feeling burdened by health concerns and having some companies care about that and not. So the book also explores some of these like much deeper, bigger, scarier things. And that's not to diminish productivity guilt or Zoom fatigue. Those are also exhausting. And essentially the core of the book is like, if you're suffering, you're suffering. And so there should be ways to understand like how you can emerge from that with meaning and reach out to other people. So I always like to clarify that. Why it's hard to talk about this, especially at work. I mean, the workplace historically is just not at all been friendly to feelings. And because of that, emotions have also gotten a horrible reputation at work because we've never learned or been equipped with the skills to talk about things when they're, I don't want to say smaller, but when they're starting or at the beginning of a feeling. We don't have ways to flag that for other people, to work through it with our colleagues. There's no explicit space in which we can express ourselves. And so again, it goes back to the suppression. I'm going to act like everything's fine. That's called emotional labor or surface acting. And it's hugely detrimental to your mental health, to how you actually feel and how feel you're able to show up, and things like productivity, retention, all of these metrics that companies care about. And so what happens is then we end up exploding. So that's when you see these like explosions of anger. Sorry, I have the San Francisco Hells Angels clubhouse at the end of my street. So if you're hearing motorcycles, you could cut that
All
out,
good.
or you could share with everyone. Yeah, so we have these explosions of anger. That's why you see someone like burst into tears in the middle of a meeting. I think most people would prefer not to have that happen, but because there's been no other way to talk about things, to work through their emotions, that's what ends up happening. And then that can feel like disruptive or unproductive, especially if it's anger. That can be really hurtful to the people around you. So I think this idea of like, to be professional, you can't fail, you can't fuss, you certainly can't feel, has actually created a world in which we have these outsized emotional outbursts that then just further this horrible trope of like, emotions don't belong at work. The core is, we're just human, and you can't turn off your feelings. Like, I don't care if you're at work, if you're watching a movie, if you're in the shower, you're just going to feel things, and that's totally normal. And so it's time we learn how to acknowledge and then express what's going on.
Yeah, it almost feels like over the past 15, 20 years, people are finally able to acknowledge their own emotions, whether it's at work or at home. And I feel like this is the next evolution of that, acknowledging the feelings that you have at work, because you're right, you do bring home work every single day. It's not like you can have a terrible day at work and then have the best evening ever. Like, when does that ever happen? So, yeah, I love how you explain that.
Well, and the thing
think-
now is, sorry, just quickly to add, like we all work, most of us work at home
Yeah.
as well. And so
Literally
now
bringing work home.
yeah, now the two are like totally integrated. And so that it feels like there's more at stake now as well.
I was going to say something very similar, which is, I think the reverse is also more true, where you usually don't have like it's not, like someone you love passes away and then you just show up for your meeting bright and cheery. I think that's often expected, but basically that just feels horrible because, like ideally you'd have a day off, or at least you could flag to people what was going on. So because home is work and work is home, it kind of goes both ways now. And we've all been having to deal with, like completely ridiculous levels of uncertainty, of stress, of despair in many cases over the past 2 years.
Yeah, what I love about the book, that what I know about the book so far, is I feel like all the literature out there has been focused on like the outcomes, like at the point of, you mentioned explosions of anger. Like I have certainly felt that. I've operated in that place. It's embarrassing. I've had shame when I've done that, regret, like all of these like horrible feelings. And in all the literature out there, it's like, oh, well, there's the drama triangle and you need to actively, listen. And it's like, well, how do I, get, to the things that led to the explosion and like just prevent this from happening altogether? And I feel like there historically haven't been good ways or good tools in the work context to deal with this stuff. And so I'm super excited to learn more. So there are 7 big feelings that you highlight in the book. There's uncertainty, comparison, anger, burnout, perfectionism, despair, and regret. And so I'm curious, how did you guys get to these 7 specific big feelings? Can you share a little more about the research that went into identifying these?
Yeah, so we started out, the book actually grew largely out of No Hard Feelings, our first book, which was very much just emotions at work, looks at how it affects leadership, communication, things like that. Came out in February 2019. So it actually turned 3 2 days ago. Happy birthday,
Woo.
book. And so we were doing kind of corporate workshops or just panels and discussions. And yeah, it was all, I would say, going well. And then the pandemic hit and we started doing some virtual sessions. And what we found was that the tenor of conversations, the questions we were getting in Q&As were so different. It wasn't like, how do I have a good one-on-one with my manager? It was, I'm completely overwhelmed. I just don't even feel like I can do my job anymore. I don't feel like I have the energy to get a new job. What do I do? Or I just feel like, I'm alone, I'm isolated, I live alone. This is really hard. Can I say that to anyone on my team? So it was just very different. So we had a list of, I would say, kind of 12 big emotions that came out of those questions. Then we ran a survey and ended up, I think, surveying like around 1,200 people all around the world in different roles, actually interviewed a lot of them. And then that whittled it down to 8. And the one that we ended up not including was shame, because we felt like Brene Brown, who's incredible, has covered that so extensively that we also wanted to just remain humble around, like, we don't have more to say. Just go look at Brene Brown. She's a star. She's done it really well. But the others, we felt like there was more to the conversation. And there was also more around people's different perspectives. So for example, in the anger chapter, we spend a lot of time in that chapter also talking about your identity and how that affects whether you feel comfortable expressing anger, or if you've sort of been socialized by society to just always repress anger because you don't want to be perceived in a certain way. And obviously, like, who you are, how you look, your culture, that kind of thing has a huge role in, unfortunately, how people treat you and what they expect of you. So we also spend some time exploring those kinds of things.
So one thing that I really enjoyed from your past book, No Hard Feelings, is when you and your co-author Molly would share where you fell on the different spectrums of emotions, personality traits, work styles. And I think the one that comes to mind for me right away is when you talk about how you get into the details and you're more of a perfectionist, while Molly is more hard charging, is more willing to put something to publish something that's 90% of the way done, and just like figuring out like how to work with somebody who has a different work style than you. So I'm curious, out of the 7 big feelings that are addressed in your book, which one resonates the most with you when you think about the past couple of years, and which one do you think would resonate most with Molly?
Yeah, so I think with Molly, despair, and she's very open about this in the book. She's had some chronic health issues that, combined with sort of being forced to be, cut off from many of our support systems over the past 2 years, really culminated in her and just feeling like there wasn't hope and like she wasn't ever going to get better. So that one, she also shares her story in the book in a lot of detail, which I think could be nice for people too. One of the big things was just trying to normalize these hard things we go through and saying, like, she generally feels better now. And so things aren't perfect, but you can kind of move through these difficult feelings. For me, I would say, I think perfectionism, it still manifests. It's like the vacation thing. I just don't take vacation. It's really hard for me to shut off. And it's like I have, I have this thing. I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but it's like a vacation despair, where I'm just so used to like working and working and posting things on social media. And then I get these little bursts of affirmations, like, oh, I got a like, I got a comment, I got a Slack emoji response. I got, it just feels good. And then that becomes addictive. And so, for example, at Humu, I had 2 weeks off over the holidays. And the first 2 days, I really was like, I'm going to be offline. I'm not going to do anything. I was just in a funk. And I was like, oh, I'm just not getting all these dopamine hits that I'm used to, because I've so intrinsically, like, I don't know, I've just started to depend on those to feel good and to like it's like a good, like, oh, I am worthy. I am like a cool person that people want to hang out with. And so I always have these few days at the beginning of a vacation where I'm like, who am I outside of like the clapping Slack emoji? Who am I? And so that's like, I wouldn't say that I've figured it out. I think I have better, like more coping skills than I used to, but that's the one that for me was, that chapter was really valuable to research.
It's funny. I'm the same way. Whenever I have extended periods of time where I'm not working or doing something, I've noticed that's when I get more anxious, or I feel like a little bit like off and I can't really figure out why. And I think I think maybe you just answered the question. Maybe it's, I don't know, I'm not getting those dopamine hits that I'm used to, or I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out, but I definitely resonate with that.
Well, in vacation despair, like that is a real thing I have suffered. I just didn't have words to describe it. I've always said the only time I feel like I have a real vacation is a 2-week vacation, because it takes me 3 or 4 days in the front end to like unwind, to suffer from the despair. Then I have like 3 or 4 days in the middle that I'm actually on vacation. And then there's like 3 or 4 days on the back end before I get back to work that I'm like suffering from the despair as well. It's insane.
Totally. Yeah. That resonates.
And then I guess whenever I look at the 7 big feelings, I think for me it might be comparison. I don't know. It's just tough whenever you have like a ton of, I mean, this is obviously a great problem to have, but there's so many like high performers that we work with. It's just hard not to compare yourself and be like, am I doing enough? Is the work that I'm doing adequate? Like, what else could I be doing? So that one definitely hit home for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That one, they're all intertwined too, which is
Yeah.
the point we make in the book, where it's like, you have perfectionist tendencies, you also tend to compare yourself a lot. So yeah, that one also, I mean, they all, it's like, there's a reason we pick these, which is we experience all of them a lot.
Yeah, for me, over the last couple of years, it's definitely been burnout. And in fact, Daniel and I, we did a teardown episode where we talked about the history of burnout. And I can't remember if Daniel selected the article or if I did. We just like, someone randomly chose it. And, you know, it was episode 29. And I'll never forget it, because it was literally that episode where I was like talking and listening and being in my head concluding like, holy, I'm suffering from this. What we are describing is how I feel right now. And so one of my default moves is like, I lump my feelings into the anxiety bucket. Like I'm just anxious right now, or like, I feel like I've got a lot of anxiety, which it's not always helpful in dealing with the emotion. It's like, I'm recognizing it, or I might have partial awareness. So I think that putting a common language around the emotions for me is such a powerful thing, because then I can like look at it and, come to terms with it and become more aware of like, okay, what can I do about this? But yeah, for sure, it was burnout for me.
That's such a cool story to hear, because that's something in the research that emotion researchers talk about a lot, is called emotional granularity, where you can just specifically pinpoint what it is you're feeling. So instead of being like, I'm anxious or I feel bad, you say like, I feel frustrated, I feel tired, I feel burnt out. And then you can kind of like go further and further down. There's actually, if people want to Google emotions wheel, it's this big wheel, and in the middle it has like 4 core emotions, and then it splits out and you can kind of get more and more granular about what you're feeling. And yeah, the research shows that once we're able to pinpoint, that's actually when you can start to figure out like, oh, this is what I'm feeling. Here's what might be driving that. Here are some steps I can take, versus this nebulous, like big lump of anxiety on your back, which you never really face. And then you just don't really do anything about it.
Yeah, I just try to grind it out and like fake it. I make it and like just get through that swirl. So there was another snippet from the Amazon synopsis that caught my attention. And it said, we can't stop emotions from bubbling up, but we can learn how to make peace with them. And this really resonates for me. I think most people I'll speak for myself. I think that, in the past, I wanted to just stop the bad feelings altogether. Like my end goal is like, how do I just make this go away? Versus learning how to make peace with them. And in my experience, when I try to just stop it or make it go away, there can be some really negative consequences in my life. And so I've had to work hard to learn to deal with the feelings. And so can you share some of the tools that you provide in terms of how to deal with or how to make peace with the seven big feelings? Some of the things you share in the book?
Yeah, I'll touch on two that have been really valuable for me. So the first is kind of what you said of just giving yourself permission to have the emotion, which sounds very basic, but I think most of us, it's exactly that. It's like, oh, I'm angry, or oh, I'm this thing that I shouldn't be feeling. Just suppress, 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 make it go away. I don't want to confront it. This is not who I want to be. And I had this actually in my relationship early on, where I would come home from a bad day, or I would just be having a bad day, which again is like, you are going to have a bad day. This is absolutely normal in life. And I would just want to pretend like everything was fine. And so my partner would notice that something was wrong and be like, what's going on? I'd be like, I'm fine. It's totally fine. And it was clearly not. And then he would get worried that he had done something. And we would just get into these weird non-fights where it was just because I didn't want to admit that I was having a bad day because I felt embarrassed about it. And so now, again, I'm still not perfect at this, but I'm much, much better. Sometimes I'll wake up and just be like, I'm grumpy. I don't know what it is, but I'm not having a good day. It has nothing to do with you. And then he'll be like, great, do you want me to leave you alone? Do you need food? Like, what's going on? Like, what can I do? And it's just so much, because usually we end up laughing about it then, as opposed, it's not this shameful thing that I've tucked away that makes him anxious. And it's also like, if you don't flag those things and you aren't open, you don't give the other person an opportunity to support you, to open up themselves. So you just sort of perpetuate the cycle of like, this is bad, because now I had this feeling and it led to this bad situation. Therefore, it's extra bad to feel that feeling. So I think one is just like being a little more open, giving yourself grace. And then the other, the phrase in the book that we share around dealing with uncertainty that I found so valuable is, when you're facing a new situation or something that feels overwhelming, just telling yourself, I'm a person learning too. And so instead of saying like, I'm a new manager and I need to be amazing, just being like, I'm a person learning to be a new manager. And I think it's such a nice, it really flips you into growth mindset. Again, gives yourself permission to make some mistakes, makes you more open to seeking feedback, and really just takes the pressure off of like, and you can apply it to anything. I'm a person learning to exist through a pandemic. I'm a person learning to plan a wedding, whatever it might be that is stressful. It's acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. That's okay, because this is a new thing. And so I think I've said that phrase to myself a lot over the last year since finding it.
I've actually been saying some version of that to my friends recently. The version is, I'm a person that's finally learning how to like be an adult. And I don't know, I feel like you definitely can like apply that to any situation. And I find myself thinking that a lot, like we're all just people trying to figure it out, trying to be happy, trying to like make an impact. And whenever I remind myself that, I don't know, I guess it like makes it a little bit easier to be empathetic, because not only am I a person that's just trying to figure out life and, you know, how to be as happy as I possibly can, but everybody else is in the same boat.
I like that point. Yeah, I actually haven't thought about this, but I like applying it to other people too. Like, if you get a new manager, it's like they're just a person who's learning to manage me. And so I love the point about empathy.
Yeah, this is really embarrassing for me to share with you guys, but I'm going to share it anyway. But I don't think I honestly appreciated and understood the emotion of empathy. I was so caught up in myself and what I had going on, and the race to get all the things and do all the accomplishments and go that like I just didn't have like a headspace until like the last 6 or 7 years to truly understand like empathy. And another thing that is embarrassing for me to admit is I didn't really realize that self-compassion was a thing. And it was in the how important it is to practice self-compassion to myself. And someone like heard me talking like this negative self-talk that I was like sharing with someone, and they commented back and they were like, would you, if if you were talking about a friend, would you use the same words that you were describing about yourself and the things you didn't do or how you failed or whatever? Would you give the same feedback that you're giving yourself to like one of your friends? And I was like, absolutely not. And they're like, then why are you doing it to yourself?
Yeah.
And it like, it is a game-changing thing when you learn how to be gentle with yourself and learn how to show yourself some grace and self-compassion, which I think is what you're talking about, and giving you permission to just feel the feels, right?
Yeah, I love the point around, I think we often just don't even realize our self narratives. And so having a friend check you on it or just actually confronting it. So I had this experience when I was writing the perfectionism chapter where our editor prompted me to just, she was like, why don't you write out one of these thought spirals that you have? Because it would be useful for people to have an example. And the thought spiral was literally like, I sent this email like later than I wanted to. It had been a few days. I'm going to get fired. Everyone will hate me. I will like never find it. Like it was just wild how fast it went from like, yeah, this like, I didn't send this email out on the Monday, sent it out on a Wednesday to like my life is, yeah, just like my life is over. There's no hope for the future. It was like 3 little leaps and that's where I was. So seeing it written out was really helpful and being like, okay, this is a thing that's happening.
And I'll give Steven some credit here. So I think maybe like a year or two ago, I was having a chat with Steven and I was describing one of my negative thought spirals that I had gone into. And I was like, how do you deal with situations like this? Like, how do you get yourself out of this funk? And I don't know if you're okay with me sharing this, Steven, but he has like this morning ritual that he does every single morning that I think part of it is you meditate, you do like your gratitude list. And then the last thing that you do, which actually was what you were recommending, was he's like, I don't know if you're religious or you're spiritual, but this is what I do. I like basically get on my knees and whatever it is that I'm really worried about that is out of my control, I just say like, you know, you know, meeting gods or email gods or business gods, like I've done everything that I can control. It's like on you and it's out of my control. That way, like you're, basically telling yourself like, stop worrying about this, stop being really stressed about it, stop having that like fight or flight response, because at the end of the day, you've done everything that you can do. And all you can do now is basically let go. And
I am forever going to be throwing it up to the meeting gods. I love that.
I do this all the time, Steven. Like
I forgot about that. I didn't know where you were going. I was like, I gave you the thumbs up because it's like we're going down this path, so let it fly. But I had forgotten about that conversation.
Yeah, Steven, so I'm curious. Awesome. So I love morning rituals. I'm curious, like how you established that one, or just how you came upon that routine.
Yeah, so it has been a journey. And it started with, me adding like one component and seeing the benefits of that, but and this is how the insanity of my mind is, like, as soon as I see the benefits, I start to like, there's like negative creep also. And I'm like, oh, well, these things that used to preoccupy me are no longer there, but now like I created a space and now something's crept in. And so I added another practice, when I shared with my friends and mentors and, people in my life, of the things that I was struggling with. And so the one piece that Daniel left out that was like the final piece and the big game changer for me, in addition to everything he mentioned, and it's time consuming. So it's a commitment and you do have to show yourself some grace, because there was a period where it 3 years in a row. Like I woke up early, I did it exactly the same every single time. And now I'm at a place where it's like, okay, like if I don't do a piece of it, like everything's going to be fine. But it's the last component's affirmations. And so,
that's right.
Writing down, 10 affirmations, the gratitudes, they always change. I try to do something new, a list of 10 gratitudes, brand new every single day. That's really, really hard for me to have new ones. The affirmations, those are always the same for me. And I don't know why this is just how it evolved for me. But it's things like I am worthy of healthy and happy relationships in all aspects of my life, like things like that. And the crazy thing, it works. I don't understand it at all, and I am not like a religious type person. Like it's all contrary to what my instincts would tell me, is right or what I should do. And so I had to abandon all that, and it's powerful stuff. It works for me, but it's been a journey and an evolution for sure.
That's really cool.
So I can't believe we're already 45 minutes in and we're nearing kind of the final segment. I have one more question to ask about the book. And that is, if there's one lesson that you hope everyone takes away from reading Big Feelings, what would you want it to be and why?
Yeah, so I think it's, again, sounds sort of simple at first, but we surveyed these 1,200 people all over the world, different backgrounds, different ages. And the first question we asked was, have you ever heard any of these 7 emotions that we cover in the book described as bad or negative? And I think one person said no, and everyone else said yes. And then we also asked, have you felt any of these? Everyone said yes. And then have you felt bad because you were feeling them? And everyone said yes. So it's this interesting thing of, we're taught to think of these emotions as bad and negative, and yet everyone experiences them. And like, not to terrify people, but if you haven't yet, you probably will. Like, it's just sort of an inevitability of life. If you get to live long enough, you will experience loss, you will go through hard times. That's just what happens here on earth. And so I think that's the lesson, is like kind of what you already said, just shedding these notions that don't serve us, even if it goes against our instincts. It's like, you are not the only person who is suffering. And I think that can be both relieving and humbling. Is like, yeah, I'm feeling burnout. And it doesn't mean that you need to share all of a sudden, like whatever feels good to you. I think it's just this knowledge of other people have experienced this. I don't need to be ashamed of it. I don't need to beat myself up about it, even if that's the language that's been put into my head as a child. It's just like, how can I look for ways to move forward?
That reminds me of something that my dad, who Stephen calls Big Al, likes to tell us or remind us. He's like, sometimes if I'm like in the mall or like in some public setting and I look around, I have to remind myself, like, everyone here is either suffering right now in some way or has suffered at some point. And I don't know, I think that's sort of what you're saying here. Like, we all have these emotions that are very normal and they shouldn't be labeled as negative. They're just emotions and they're a part of the human experience. And the better that we can be at acknowledging these emotions, then the better we're going to be at coping. So
yeah. Wow. Big Al. So wise.
Big Al. Very wise. Very wise. And there's something you said, I think you said that you learn some of these things, or we learn some of these things as children. Have you and Molly thought about a Big Feelings for kids? Like, I'm just immediately, I was thinking about my 2 daughters as you guys, like in the last like minute of the conversation, and they're 10 and 12. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they could really benefit from reading something like this. So just an idea. I know you just finished it, but
there's actually a lot of cool stuff that's been happening, I would say, over the last 5 years in this space in particular, because so much of this is learned as like, I think especially anger is the emotion where we touch on this, where it's like, anger is particularly ugly and unfeminine. Like, girls are sugar and spice and everything nice. And therefore you're just taught anger's really bad if you're a woman, or if you're a girl. And then men face sort of similar things in different ways. So there's a lot of people doing cool stuff in the children's space, but I mean, I love to draw. It would be delightful. Maybe someday.
That would be awesome. Well, we're entering the rapid fire section of the conversation. And so I'm going to start picking up the pace a little bit here. So my first question in this section for you, Liz, if you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old Liz, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
I think I would say one, just chill out. And two, you don't have to be a lawyer, banker, doctor. Like there's a whole world of professions in the next 10 years. There's, like data analysts, like marketing has all these positions that definitely didn't exist 10 years ago. So I think just to be a little less rigid.
That's the third episode in the row where we've gotten almost that exact same response.
Wow.
So Katie Burke thought she was going to be a lawyer. And then I think Jessica from Refine Labs, who we had on last episode with Megan, she thought she was going to be a doctor. And both of them said, I would tell my 22-year-old self, like, relax, you're going to figure it out.
I think it'd be cool, speaking of children, to do just a series of like, here's random jobs, because it just never occurred to me that like basically 99.9% of jobs never entered my headspace until I was 24.
Yeah, same.
Same.
My mom, who's probably listening to this, she wanted me to be a pharmacist, and I don't think I would have enjoyed it.
Oh, I read this. I can't remember where this is from. I didn't come up with it, but I think about this a lot with my parents, where it was your parents want what's good for you, and that's not necessarily what's best for you. So like, I think about that a lot of like, my parents just wanted me to have a good life, and this is how they knew to do that. But that just wasn't actually what was best. So it's still like empathy for their perspective, but being like, it's not for me.
Well, I'm so glad you found your path because it's benefiting so many other people. Seriously. So my next question, moving on, we got, like I said, I have to pick up the pace, unfortunately. If you could fix any HR people problem with a magic wand, what would it be and why?
I think
this is a tough one.
This like, there's no space to talk about feelings, basically. It's just meetings, there's productivity, there's learning and training, but there's not like, here's a great way to open a meeting with a fun prompt. Here's if you're a manager, here's how you really check in with someone. Here's how you say like, what one thing can I do to support you this week? I would just like want more support on the soft skills side.
I love that one. And I think I can't say all, that's too absolute, but so many managers out there would benefit from that problem being solved, because it feels like it's such a complex thing these days to address the non-business aspects of the job, which are, increasingly, that's the pie of everything that's involved in the job. The non-business stuff, seems to be growing, increasing and increasing. So my last question before I hand it back over to Daniel, when you look around the corner into 2022, what do you see coming next for the future of work? Do you have any major predictions?
It serves me, but I really think the future of work is emotional, especially I think hybrid is probably here to stay in some form. And so you have to be really thoughtful about connections, and it's just harder to do all that when you're not in person. So I think the soft skills in a place where you're not together all the time is going to be challenging and important.
So before we wrap it up and ask you the final two closing questions, where can people find Big Feelings?
Yes, so you can find it on Amazon, as most things. You can also Barnes and Nobles. There's like, it should be in like local libraries starting April 26th. You can ask your independent bookseller to order it, just like places where books tend to be.
And remind me, what date is that coming out?
April 26th.
April 22nd.
So
got it.
Yep. In a little bit.
Awesome. Okay. So who should we bring onto the show next? Is there anybody that you've been following on LinkedIn that you really respect, or an HR leader that you know of that you think would be great for us to have on?
Yeah, so I really love Erica Kesslin's work. She does a lot around rituals and how they can benefit teams. Like I said, I'm like morning routines I'm obsessed with. And so I think she's great. It might be interesting too. Very tactical, like actionable advice that she gives people.
Erica Kaplan. We're going to reach out to her.
Keswin, Keswin. I can send you her name.
Okay, cool. All right. So we do a one word or phrase close where we all respond with a word or phrase from the episode that we want to close with. And I will let Steven go first because I usually hop in first so that I can steal the word that I have on
my. It's a phrase or 2 words. I'm going to go with self-compassion.
Liz, you want to go next?
I'm going to go with feel feelings.
Okay. I'm going to go with emotions.
Love it. That was a good build up too.
Yeah, that was me.
Like,
the wheels were turning.
Like, what's it going to be?
I gotta remember
the wheels were turning. I was like, I should have thought of this ahead. But yeah, there you go. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining us. Great conversation. Glad that you were able to join. We have maybe we can do this again in the future.
Cool. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and also really enjoyed hearing from both of you. So thanks for sharing.
And congratulations on the book launch. I'm super excited for you, and I can't wait to read it. And yeah, this was a blast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Cool. Thank you.
Talk to you later, Liz. Bye.
Bye.